Good afternoon, everyone. I am Angel Ann S. Acosta, and today we are going to discuss about prose versus poetry versus drama. At the end of this lesson, students will be able to clearly identify what is prose, poetry, and drama, and they will also be able to understand and appreciate the genres of literature. The third one would be students will able to differentiate prose, poetry, and drama through the use of Venn diagram. Before we proceed to the discussion proper, I have here a set of pictures of individual. So, whom do you think they are? You're right. These individuals are William Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, and Anne Frank. Do you know any literary piece that they have made? You're right. William Shakespeare is the author of the famous literary work which entitled The Romeo and Juliet. Edgar Allan Poe was known for his work which entitled The Raven. And Anne Frank was known because of her famous diary which named Kitty. So at this juncture, I want you to lend your ears and fasten your seatbelt as we proceed to the discussion proper. So let's talk about prose. When we say prose, it is a literary device referring to writing that is structured in a grammatical way, with words and phrases that build sentences and paragraphs. Works wrote in prose feature language that flows in natural patterns of everyday speech. When we say prose, the simplest definition of it is it is a form of writing which has a natural flow with speech and writing. It is grammatically correct but does not have a metrical structure as something like poetry would have. When we talk about prose, we are referring to a type of language which does not demonstrate any particular structure but leans more in favor of delivering concise and clear language that can be easily understood. The term prose is derived from the Latin language and translates as meaning as straightforward. There are different literary works which can be characterized as prose. One of these is the diary. Another example are the recipes, the fiction books, the legends, the tales, and etc. So let's proceed to the classification of prose. There are two classifications of it. The first one is the fiction. When we say fiction, fiction is any creative work, shapely and narrative work, portraying individuals, events, or places that are imaginary or in ways that are imaginary. Mystery, science fiction, romance, fantasy, folklore, crime thrillers are all fiction genres. And one of the examples of this genre is The Beauty and the Beast. When we say fiction, it is a deliberately fabricated account of something. It can also be a literary work based on imagination rather than a fact like a novel or a short story. The Latin word fictus means to form, which seems like a good source for the English word fiction, since fiction is formed in the imagination. Fiction has slightly darker additional meaning, which is a deliberately lie or untruth. When we talk about the line between the fact and fiction, we're talking about the difference between truth and lie, since fiction is a product of imagination. The other classification of prose is non-fiction. When we say non-fiction, it is any documentary or media content that attempts in good faith to convey information about the real world rather than being grounded in imagination. The common example of these non-fiction genres include diaries, biographies, documentary films, textbooks, recipes, and journal. When we say nonfiction, it is an account or representation of a subject which is presented as fact. It is a broad genre of writing that encompasses all books that aren't rooted in the fictional narrative or imagination. Nonfiction writing can be based in history and biography. It can be instructional. It can offer commentary and humor. And it can ponder philosophical questions. When we say fiction, it is the opposite. When we say nonfiction, rather, it is the opposite of fiction, which is based on fact rather than imagination. So at this juncture, let's proceed to poetry, which is another literary genre. When we say poetry, it is derived from the Greek word poesis, which means making or creating. It also called verse. Poetry is a type of literature based on the interplay of words and rhythm. It often employs rhyme and meter. When we say poetry, it has been around for almost 4,000 years. Like other forms of literature, poetry is written to share ideas, expressing emotions, and create imagery. Poets choose words for their meaning and acoustics, arranging them to create a tempo known as the meter. Some poems incorporate rhyme schemes with two or more lines at the end like sounding words. Poetry is a type of literature that conveys a thought, describes scene, or tells story in a concentrated lyrical arrangement of words. So let's proceed to the elements of poetry. The first element of poetry is the meter. When we say meter, it is the rhythmic structure within a poem and is dictated by the number of syllables and the pattern in which these syllables are emphasized. When we say meter, it is a definitive pattern found in verse. The meter is a pattern of beats in a line of poetry. It is a combination of the number of beats and arrangements of stress. The second element is the rhyme. When we say rhyme, it is created with the last one or more syllables within separate words match. A poem is considered to rhyme when the last words of the lines within the verse shares this relationship. And we see rhyme, it is one of the important element of poetry because sounds means how a line or what sounds some specific words evoke in a reader's mind. Rhythm is a set of pattern that is formed by these sounds. In poetry, rhythm refers to the metrical rhythm that involves the arrangements of syllables into repeating patterns called fit. The third element is called scheme. When we say scheme, refers to the rhythmic pattern within a verse of poetry. The schemes could contain words that rhyme at each of every line throughout the stanza, or alternating lines or in couplets. When we say rhyme, it is the repetitive pattern of sounds found in poetry. The fourth one element is the verse. So when you say verse, the verse of the poem is a way to describe the relationship between the rhyme and the meter in a poem. When we say verse, it represents any grouping of lines in the poetic composition with groupings traditionally have been referred to as a stanza. The last element is the stanza. When we say stanza, it is a group of lines within the verse of a poem. They often follow a similar pattern or meter or contain a similar idea but not always. When we say stanza, it is usually a set off from others by a blank line or indentation. It can be regular rhyme and metrical schemes, but they are not required to have either. The stanzas have also been known by terms such as batch, fit, and stave. So let's proceed to the Types of poetry. Let's proceed to the types of poetry. The first type is lyric poetry. Lyric poetry uses song-like and emotional words to describe a moment, an object, a feeling, or a person. When we say lyric poetry, it is generally short and expresses deep personal feelings. Lyric poems may be sung or accompanied by music, but may not. Lyrics often have a refrain or a line or lines that are repeated throughout the poem. There are several types of poetry that one could classify as lyric poetry. The first one is elegy. When we say elegy, it is a reflective poem to honor the dead. An elegy is a very sad poem, often expressing sorrow over someone who has died. Elegies are typically written in couplets that have a specific pattern of meter. The second one is the haiku. When we say haiku, it has 17-syllable poem that uses a natural imagery to express an emotion. Haiku is a tiny poem with a huge impact. This traditional Japanese poetic form tends to focus on nature, animals, seasons, colors, and contrast. Although haiku can have a variety of structures, the most common format of the three-line poem doesn't rhyme and follow this pattern. The third one is ode. When we say ode, it is an elevated poem that pays tribute to a person, idea, place, or another concept. When we say ode, it is a lyric poem with a complicated structure that praises a person or marks an important event. Odes are generally meant to perform with music. The last type of lyric poetry is the sonnet. When we say sonnet, it is a descriptive 14-line poem with a specific rhyme scheme. This 14-line with a formal rhyme scheme expressing different aspects of a single thought, mood, or feeling, resolve or sum up in the last line of the poem. Originally, short poems are accompanied by mandolin or lute music. Sonnets are generally composed in the standard meter of the language in which they were written. Now, let's proceed to another type of poetry, which is the narrative poetry. The another type of poetry is the narrative poetry. When we say narrative poetry, the narrative poem tells a story. Narrative poems are usually of human interest. They can be short or long, but some narrative poems uses rhymes and some do not. There are examples of poetry in this category, which includes the first one is allegory. It is a narrative poem that chooses an extended metaphor to make a point. When we say allegory, it's a literary device in which characters or events represent or symbolize ideas and concepts, and also functions in the same way an extended metaphor does. But an allegory contains symbols that connect to specific people, ideas, events, and etc., where a metaphor uses symbols that represent general or universal ideas. The second one is the ballad. When we say ballad, it is a narrative poetry set to music. Ballad is a short narrative poem which is written to be sung and has a simple but dramatic theme. Ballads can be of love, death, the supernatural, or even a combination of the three. Many ballads also contain a moral which is expressed in the final stanza. The third one is burlesque. When we say burlesque, it is a mock epic poem that tells an ordinary story in a melodramatic way. When we say burlesque, it is a written or dramatic work that makes fun of something but making it appear ridiculous. The last one is epic. When we say epic, it is a lengthy poem that tells a story of heroic adventures. When we say epic, it's usually a very long poem of several thousand lines relating the story of a hero and his struggle against impossible odds. This is one of the oldest form of poetry and was usually recited orally by professional storytellers or singers over several nights, often at a court of feasting in table. The last one, the last form of poetry is dramatic poetry. When we say dramatic poetry is also known as dramatic monologue. It is meant to be spoken or acted. Similar to narrative poetry, dramatic poetry tells a story. When we say dramatic poetry, it uses the elements of drama. One or more characters speak to other characters, to themselves, or to the reader. Dramatic poetry typically includes a tense of situation or emotional conflict. Many dramatic poems appear as the first one is monologue. When we say monologue, it is a speech given by one character to another, or by one character to the audience, also known as dramatic verse when not in poetic form. When we say monologue, it comes from the Greek word monos, which means alone, and logos, which means speech. It is a literary device which is the speech or verbal presentation that a single character represents in order to express his collection of thoughts and ideas aloud. Often this character addresses directly to audience or another character. Monologues are found in a dramatic medium like films, plays, and also in non-dramatic mediums such as poetry. The second one is soliloquy. When we say soliloquy, it is a speech given by one character to himself or herself. It is a dramatic representation of inner monologue. When we say soliloquy, it is derived from the Latin word solus, which means alone, and loqui, which means to speak. It is a speech that one gives to oneself. In a play, a character delivering a soliloquy talks to themselves, thinking out loud, as it were to the audience better understand what is happening to the character internally. So now let's proceed to drama. When we say drama, it is a written work that tells a story through action and speech and is meant to be acted on stage. When we say drama, it is a story told in a dialogue by performers in front of an audience. Drama is another word for play. When you think of drama, you might think of stage plays performed in theaters. However, drama is more than theater. So let's proceed to the classification of drama. The first one is comedy. When we say comedy, it is a type or genre of drama that is intended to make people laugh. The example of comedy is the William Shakespeare Much Ado About Nothing, which is one of the most famous instances of comedy. William Shakespeare Much Ado About Nothing is one of the most famous instances of comedy. With smart banter and more than a few stupid misunderstandings, Beatrice and Benedict go from enemies to lovers. And as it customary in Shakespearean comedies, it concludes with a wedding. The second one is farce. When we say farce, it is another type of drama in literature which is broadly humorous. However, there are significant differences between a comedy and a farce. When we say farce, it aims to entertain audiences by using highly improbably plot situations, exaggerated characters, and often slapsticks elements. One of the examples of farce is Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. It the plot revolves around two guys, which named Vladimir and Estragon. The men wait beneath a tree for Godot, a mystery figure. We do discover, though, that Godot continually sends word that he would arrive the next day, but this never happens. In other words, nothing happens with any surety in this drama. The second one is tragedy. When we say tragedy, they are one of the most common and popular types of drama. As you can probably guess, tragedies tend to be sad. When we say tragedy, it is a narrative about serious and important action that ends unhappily. Usually, a tragedy ends with the death of the main characters. In some, the disaster. These totally innocent characters. In others, the main characters are in some ways responsible for their downfall. The example of tragedy is Shakespeare's opera, a plethora of tragedies, which is to pick. Few, however, can compare to Othello in terms of its vicious villain, tragic demise of its hero, and heartbreaking denouement. Because he doesn't believe he deserves the life he has, Othello loses everything he has ever loved or desired. The next one is tragic comedy. When we say tragic comedy, this complex among the types of drama in literature. They are more than just tragedy and comedy blended together. When we say tragic comedy, it is a literary genre that blends aspects of both tragic and comic forms, most often seen in dramatic literature. The term can variously describe either a tragic play which contains enough comic elements to lighten the overall mood or a serious play with a happy ending. Phineas Williams, as street story named Bizarre, contains enough comedic aspect to keep it from being classified as a tragedy. Yet no one can argue that Blanche Deville is anything other than a terribly broken character. It is the epitome of modern tragic comedy. The next one is melodrama. When we say melodrama, these are the exaggerated kind of drama in literature, in which conventional, one-dimensional characters such as heroes, heroines, and villains contend with exciting, passionate, and frequently deadly situations. When we say melodrama, it comes from the word melos, which means a Greek word for song combined with drama. Music is used to increase the emotional response or to suggest characters. Essentially, a villain poses a threat, the hero escapes the threat, and there is a happy ending. The example of this is Henrik Ibsen's A Doll House. Nora's exaggerated emotions place the piece squarely in the category of melodrama. The finale is a blend of Nora's delight and the hope of Thorvald's melancholy and despair. The next one kind of drama is the opera. When you say opera, it is a type of drama where the actors sing the lines or dialogues instead of speaking them. Opera is a musical drama that is generally sung throughout, combining the sources of vocal and instrumental music with poetry and drama, acting, scenery, and costume. The example of this is La Boheme of Giacomo Puccini. It is one of the most famous operas of all time. It portrays the sad narrative of Rodolfo and Mimi as well as the world of French Bohemia. The drama unfolds over the course of a year, set to one of the opera's most unforgettable compositions. The last one is the musical. When we say musical, Musicals are the different forms of opera. While lines in opera are sung, dialogues in musical are infused with music and performance. When we say musical, a play or motion picture in which the storyline is interferes with or developed by song, dances, and etc. The majority of the lines are being sung. One of the example of musical is the Les Miserables. It is based on larger literary work. This music drama communicates a topic directly via song and uses musical sequence to advance the story. It simplifies an original material by focusing on the most vital characters and plot components. So that's it. This that's the difference between the three literary genres, which are the prose, poetry, and dramas. So let's proceed to a short activity in order for me to know if you have an or he, for me to know if you gather some information. So this is it. The direction states that differentiate prose, poetry, and drama through the use of Venn diagram. So I will give you 3 minutes to differentiate the three literary genres. So that's it. Let's discuss the difference between the three. The first one is prose. Prose is a form of written or spoken language that follows the natural flow of speech. While the poetry is a literature that is written in verse and emphasize the rhythmic use of words to create imagery, while drama is a portrayal of fictional or non-fictional events through the performance of written dialogue. All in all, the difference between the three is that prose is a form of spoken language that we usually use every day, while poetry is a literature that being written in a verse that has rhythmic has a rhythmic use to words to create imagery, and drama is the portrayal of fictional or non-fictional events through the performance of the written dialogue. So, in order to in order for me to know if you really understand this lesson, let's proceed to a short quiz. The direction states that identify the following. I will give you 5 minutes to answer. So that's it. Time's up. I will give you the answer key in this set of questions. Number one, it is a literary device referring to writing that is structured in a grammatical way. It pertains to prose. Number two, it is any creative work that are imaginary. It refers to fiction. The number three, it conveys information about the real world rather than being grounded in imagination. It pertains to non-fiction. The fourth one, it is derived from the Greek word poesis, which refers to poetry. Number five, it refers to the rhyming pattern within a verse of poetry. It pertains to scheme. Number six, it is a reflective poem to honor the dead. What is it? It pertains to elegy. Number seven, it is the narrative poetry set to music. It pertains to what? It pertains to ballad. Number eight, it is a speech given by one character to himself or herself. It pertains to what? It pertains to soliloquy. Number nine, it is a written work that tells a story through action and speech and is meant to be acted on stage. It pertains to drama. The last one is it is a type of genre of drama that is intended to make people laugh, and it pertains to comedy. That's it. I hope that all of you are all of you get a higher or a passing grade or a passing rate. So that's it for today. I hope you learned something. Again, this is Angel Ann S. Acosta. Thank you for listening and thank you for your cooperation. God bless everyone.